for joining. Today we're going to be talking more about your position paper. We're going to dive into details on how to actually write it. So first, we're going to be looking at a winning position paper, and then we're going to see how to cite our references. After that, we're going to try to come up with our own introduction. So if everyone is ready, we can start. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So first, we're going to talk about your introductory paragraph. It's one of the most important paragraphs in your position paper because when the reader reads the introduction, they'll decide or they'll take a general idea about your position paper. They'll take the first impression, and it can basically either bore them or excite them and have them wanting to read more, have them interested. And so it's very important to do your best with the introductory paragraph. First, you're going to start it off with a hook. Here, the hook was a quote relative to the subject, which was related to Tunisia. The quote was about the revolution. It says the people demand to overthrow the regime. So it's actually exciting. It gives people a general idea about what the position paper is going to talk about. And it's very, catchy. When you read it, you're excited to know what does this position paper contain? What more can I learn? So it's really important to add a quote, an anecdote, a question, anything that's relative to your topic, but at the same time, not cheesy. For example, if your position paper is on, let's say, collaboration between countries, let's say, and your quote is going to be teamwork makes the better results, or anything cheesy like that, united we stand, or any cheesy quote like that, the chair is not going to be impressed. The best choice you can do is to have a quote from your country's president, your country's prime minister, someone, a representative of your country at a UN session, let's say. These type of quotes are the best to start your position paper. So after you put in your quote, my advice would be to add in a statistic that could actually, let's say, impress the audience. For example, here, the cost of corruption being about $2.6 trillion a year. So this is a statistic that will actually make people go like, wow, is it actually that big of a problem? So it's really important to add in some sort of statistic that will make the readers more interested, and they'll know why the topic is very important. This is the second tip after the catchy quote and the great statistic. You're going to talk really briefly about what you're going to be presenting in your position paper. Here, or actually why it is important to have your resolutions, to have your position paper, why your topic is important. Here, sustainable economic prosperity and building trust in governments, and that is actually really important. That's why the topic at hand should be handled with real with a lot of interest, with a lot of care. Lastly, your country's stance. Here it says the Republic of Tunisia recognizes the importance of implementing anti-corruption strategies. The reader or the chair now knows the stance of the country. Tunisia stands against corruption. It is important for this country to battle corruption. So this introduction gave the reader and gave everyone everything we need. A catchy phrase to make us interested, statistics to show us why the topic is important, and the country's stance. Any question? All right, so yes.
Razan, you were discussing Oh, no, never mind, never mind. Okay.
Okay. So we're gonna go back to the presentation. I don't know. Okay. So after the introductory paragraph comes the national actions. So your introductory paragraph, as we said, should contain the things that we mentioned. Now we're in the national actions paragraph. It's not that complicated. It really doesn't have to be that catchy. It really doesn't have to be that creative. You're just listing things your country or your representative has done. So highlighted in blue are the national actions. So the national actions, one, have to be relevant to your topic, obviously. And two, they're basically what your country has done within its geographical borders. Let's say this country has made, let's say the president has done a press conference about corruption. That's a national action. Let's say a law has been passed. That's a national action. A committee has been formed. A national action. Anything your country has done within its own geographical borders. That anything that doesn't that has nothing to do with another country, with another representative, it's a national action. And so let's see here they say they created the commission of inquiry. They have taken measures and they have formed anti-corruption blocks. Here they passed the law. These are all national actions. You have to include a minimum of 3 national actions in your national actions paragraph. And it's really important that there is a balance between the national actions and the international actions, not only for it to be visually pleasing, but also it would create a nice balance in your position paper. So there's nothing special about the national actions or the international actions. They're normal paragraphs, they just need to be researched. And pay attention to something which is really important. The national and international actions actually show you what your country's stance is. Let's say Tunisia was basically not anti-corruption. It didn't do any national actions to battle corruption. In fact, it did things that would hide corruption. Let's say it gave all ministers and presidents immunity. This is an action done to hide corruption. So even if you personally are against corruption, you cannot say Tunisia is anti-corruption when its actions show otherwise. So you have to be really careful with your country's stance, because even if your country's stance is, let's say, immoral or wrong, it doesn't matter. You have to defend it. And so if Tunisia, let's say, wasn't battling corruption, the introduction would have said something else. Let's say Tunisia recognizes the importance of battling corruption. However, it is not one of its biggest problems, you know? So that's really important to pay attention to. Any questions? All right, so we'll move to the international actions paragraph. The exact same thing as the national actions. However, you have to pay close attention to the fact that it has to do with the outside world. Let's say your country has signed a treaty with another country. Let's say your country has collaborated with an international NGO. Let's say your country has participated in some sort of conference, in, let's say, a UN session, an EU session, anything that has to do with the outside. This is an international actions. Let's see here, for example, the annual conference of the Mediterranean Supreme Audit Institutions. This is something international that Tunisia has taken a part of, so it's an international action. Let's say it has ratified the African Union's anti-corruption convention. This is anti-corruption convention. This is an international action because it ratified an international convention, an international treaty. Let's say your topic is climate change and your country has signed the let's say Kyoto Protocol. This is an international action. So again, nothing new. Just make sure that the actions and the stance don't collide. So this is the international actions paragraph. Any questions? All right then. We'll move to the recommendations paragraph. So this is the most important paragraph of your position paper. This is what your position paper comes to. This is where the chair sees, are you deserving of an award or are you not? Are you actually well researched? Can you think about this critically? Can you come up with solutions? Because when you're solving a problem, you have to come up with solutions that could actually solve it, not just solutions to fill your paragraph. And that's why the first tip is that your recommendations cannot be cliche. You cannot say, we can do awareness campaigns. When the chair sees this or whoever sees this, when your fellow delegates hear you say that, they're going to be like, they're going to dismiss you because this is not sustainable. This is not creative. You can't actually solve anything, not anything. You can't solve most problems with awareness campaigns. And so that's why your solutions have to be concrete, they have to be feasible, and they have to be detailed. So, first of all, the first solution presented by this delegate, with a winning position paper, I might add, is that they said we can form a judicial committee in the Arab League to battle major corruption political bodies. So this delegate proposed a solution that could actually hold all the Arab countries together in order to fight to fight corrupt leaders, to fight corrupt bodies in the Arab world. And then the delegate went on, this committee would work on effective prosecution of corruption, blah, blah, blah. So the resolution is not only creative, it is also detailed, it's also explained. When anyone hears your resolution, they don't have to ask, you don't have to make them ask. They're not going to say, oh, well, who will implement this committee? What will this committee do? What are going to be the consequences? You have to specify all of that so that everyone's questions are answered, so that no one has any doubt, any small question about your resolution. Let's say the other resolution is making a unified legislation that should be implemented to include effective legal protection of whistleblowers. And then the delegate goes on, the public media making it clear, the public media will provide it, protect it. So this resolution is also important because one, again, it's creative, it can be implemented, it's feasible, and it's detailed. So this is the other recommendation. They also specified who will implement this project. It will be implemented through the collaboration between member states and with member states that actually have the technology for it, and they will help the member states who don't. You see, this delegate thought of what I call the plot hole. When you suggest such reform that really depends on technology, let's say, they're going to tell you, what about the countries that don't have the technology? They'll find the plot hole in your resolution. It's important that you say, oh, well, the countries who have good technology will help the others who don't. And so it's really important to do that. So that is all for the recommendations paragraph. As we say, find good, feasible, creative resolutions that are always out of the box, and make sure that you put them in a detailed way, that you include all of your points, and that you think of it from all of its sides to make sure that you didn't miss any plot hole. Any questions about the recommendations paragraph? Okay, so I'll mention fast that it should be the biggest paragraph of your position paper. So make sure it is really big and not really big, but bigger than the others. And make sure you have a minimum of 3 resolutions and they have to be detailed. So that is actually all for the paragraphs of the position paper. If anyone has any questions before we move on to citing, I'd be glad to hear.
Guys, if you have any questions and you can't open your mic for whatever reason, leave them in the chat box.
All is clear, thank you.
Okay, so right now we're going to go ahead and start with citation. As you know, to avoid plagiarism, you have to cite the resources or you have to mention the places where you got your information from. It's actually really important to it's really important that you have credible resources, basically resources that end with org, gov, edu, not resources that are ending with .com, because these are not credible resources. If your resource is, let's say, twitter.com, it's not credible. It will take basically the meaning out of your position paper. If let's say your topic is about feminism and you get your info from feminism.com or like feministwomen.com, the chair is going to be like, well, this is not a credible source. Your information is not credible enough. So you can't do that. So you have to really depend on websites that are actually credible. And for you to do that, you can use Google Scholar instead of normal Google. And it would really help you just get your sources right. So let's start with how you can cite them. MUN requires you to cite your sources with MLA citation machine. And to access that, it's really simple. You just enter citation machine on YouTube, on Google, and you click here. You have to create a citation. And so where's your link? Yani, what are you citing? Are you citing from a website? Are you citing from a book? Are you citing from a journal, a scientific journal, let's say? Let's say I'm citing a website. So basically, you just have to get the link. Let's say I got something about gender equality in the workplace from the International Labour Organization, ILO. As you can see, the source is credible because the ILO is a credible source. And I just copy pasted it here. You click search. And this is it. Your source has been cited. It has been put in the correct form. As you can see, the person who wrote it is a professor. It adds to your credibility, and the source is credible. You can either cite it, but that will actually produce a lot of ads, or you can just simply copy paste this and just paste it in your Word document or wherever you're writing your position paper. Any questions? Do you want me to do it again?
No, it's clear.
All right. So,
Razan, can you just show them if they would paste it that they need to
yeah. I was just about to. Okay. So this is a Word document. Let's say a normal Word document, and you have to paste your source. So you just paste it like this, and here's your reference. And you have to do this with every website or source you've used writing your position paper, especially if you're not copy pasting from it, even if you're paraphrasing from it, you have to link it. It will actually really help you with plagiarism and with credibility. And remember, the more sources, the better. You have to have a minimum of 6. And I'm just gonna, confess to this. You don't always get your sources from the really, you don't always get your info from the really credible sources. Like, not a lot of my info is gonna come from, let's say, the UN website. Some of it is actually, is actually gonna come from an article on an unknown blog. It's gonna come from social media, but that's I'm not going to include those sources while citing. While citing, you have to include the most credible sources you've entered, even though in the conference while you're debating, you're using info from not so credible source. It can't be on your position paper. So yeah. So this is that. This is what happens when you paste it. It's actually a really simple process of copying and pasting. And that's all for citing. Now, we're gonna talk about a little bit about writing your introductory paragraph. So I'm gonna introduce you to the topic. The topic is women in the workplace or women in economies. And that's what we're going to write an introduction about. So I don't know, can anyone tell me how to start our introduction?
With a hook?
With a hook, that's true. So your hook can either be, as we said, a quote, an anecdote, a question, a really catchy statistic. It can be all of these things. Or it can be a normal quote about the topic. So right here, we have our hook. I'm gonna just highlight it in bold. Any society that fails to harness the energy and creativity of its women is at a huge disadvantage in the modern world. So this is a quote that could talk about women in the workplace. It talks about the consequence of not having women in the workplace. So can I use this quote if my country doesn't really support women in the workplace? So the answer is no, you can't use it because everything has to be about your country's stance. Everything depends on your country's stance. If your country isn't really a supporter of women, it believes women should sit at home, take care of the children, you can't use such quote. You have to use a quote that, doesn't really set off the reader, but also neutralizes the topic. So you can use a quote saying, let's say if women are, or you can use a quote that's saying scientists show that children with working moms are less happy than children with stay-at-home moms. So that could actually really strengthen your position paper, especially if your country's stance doesn't exactly support women in the workplace. The country I took in perspective here is Rwanda, and it actually supports women. So that's why we use this quote. That's number 1 of our introduction, a catchy quote, a hook. We're done with it. The second part of the introduction, what should it be, if anyone remembers?
Maybe statistics?
Yep, that's really true. It's an excellent job. Okay, so the second part is to include statistics that could actually shock the reader. So right here, I wrote, according to the ILO, achieving gender parity will trigger a GDP increase. Sorry, here's a mistake. In all nations where the global tax revenue could grow by $1.5 trillion. This is the type of numbers that could shock the readers and that could tell them that, whoa, this topic is really important. So here it is, the statistic that will shock the readers, will show the importance of the topic, and also will strengthen your country's stance. Again, if your country does not support women in the workplace, you cannot include such statistics because it will actually show that you're wrong, that your country is wrong. Even though you believe that women should be in the workplace, even though you believe that gender parity should be existed, it doesn't matter. So after we included this statistic that could actually shock the readers, we have to include our country's stance. And here, in the part where the country stance is included, there's a small mistake. Who can catch it? Okay. Does anyone wanna try? Even though it's wrong, it's completely fine. What's missing? It's more of what's missing than what's wrong. This part. Okay. So we highlighted the country's stance. We said that the Republic of Rwanda promotes the importance of women's participation in the economy, as can be seen by its national and international actions. So that's good. That's not a bad introduction. That's not a bad way to show your country's stance. However, why stick with that when you have proof that your country supports women? You know, Rwanda has the biggest percentage of women's participation in politics and in positions of decision making. When you have that big of let's say, that big of an evidence to show your country's stance, why not include it? It's really important to show evidence of your country's stance. It's really okay to say that your country supports this cause, this country is against this, is with that, but it can also really strengthen your introduction if you include some sort of evidence that your country actually really supports this topic. Let's say I can add here the Republic of Rwanda having the highest participation of women in politics. Firmly believes in the importance of women's participation in the economy and continuously promotes it, as can be seen by its actions on national and international levels. Now, this introduction has everything the reader wants: the catchy hook, the statistics, the evidence of your country's stance and your country's stance. After that, you include your national and international actions, and of course, you write your recommendations. Any question? If anyone has absolutely any question about the introduction, any paragraph of the position paper, citing, even the recommendations paragraph, all right. So if no one has any questions, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Sorry, but what do we actually put in the national action paragraph?
Okay, what do you put in your national actions paragraph? Anything that your country or your representative has done within the borders, within the geographical borders of the country. Let's say your country has done a press conference in the middle of the country. Let's say your country, let's say, passed a law. That's really common. Let's say your country has created a committee, a convention, a bloc inside of the country. It has created an institution. All of these can be national actions.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay. So, if no one has any further questions, this will be it for uh, today's presentation. Oh, I didn't see the box messages, but actually, Wissam is really right. Because if you are representing Lebanon and the topic is corruption, you'd have a really tough stance.
That's super true, but the trick is
Uh,
how you can like change it to your benefit, if you will.
Absolutely. Like flipping your arguments is actually arguing with a point of view that doesn't match with your own is actually so much harder than arguing with your own point of view. And if you can do that and still win and still do a great job, it means you're a great debater.
Yes, exactly. Agreed.
Okay, so this is it for today's session. Thank you so much for joining. I really hope everything was clear and that you didn't get bored or something. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you in future sessions.
Thank you, Razan, for presenting the meeting. It was really good. Really enjoyed the session. And thank you guys for attending. And if you have any questions, you can ask me or any of the other admins in the announcement group if you have any other questions. Other than
Okay.
that, you're dismissed. The meeting has ended.
All right. Thank you so much. See you next Thursday. Okay. They left.